I want to speak about the so-called pardoning of our FBA brother Larry Hoover from Trump, which couldn't be further from the truth. And it's a false narrative that some people are running with, because what it was Trump just commuted his sentence. He got freed of federal charges, but it's to my knowledge and understanding that our FBA brother Larry Hoover still got charges for murder in the state. And Trump pulling this move really don't impress me, because it was just done for the optics, symbolism, for him to garner black support. Essentially, it was a nothing burger. Because I much rather, see our FBA brother Larry Hoover out here amongst free society and the free world, because, truth be told, at this point, he's a political prisoner more so, and his life is a walking testimony. It can serve more good than anything, especially in Black Chicago, where young brothers and sisters would be more inclined to listen to our brother Larry Hoover, because they know that this ain't no old willy-nilly pointing and wagging the finger at them, telling them to reform their life, and hasn't actually gone through the trials, tribulations, or come out of the same struggle as they have. They know brother Larry Hoover has come from the same set of circumstances, trials, and tribulations. So in all actuality, they'd be more inclined to, reform and take our brother Larry Hoover's advice. So our brother Larry Hoover, has redeemed himself in my book. He's done the time for the crime. And now, side note, our brother Larry Hoover's son is telling people to actually go to his page and tag pictures of his pops, and with the hashtag, free Larry Hoover. So this could get out there to Illinois' governor, so they can try to get him freed of the state charges that's holding our brother in bondage inside of that four-corner prison cell. So I got the audio and the video of our brother Larry Hoover's sentence commuted, and we're going to walk through and talk about it how we normally do. Side note, there was a news reporter in here, family, that was really talking out the side of his neck, like our brother Larry Hoover ain't redeemable, this, that, and the other. He was a bad seed since birth. When in white supremacist society, all they do is glorify degenerates, Bugsy Siegel, Al Capone, Bonnie and Clyde, John Gotti. Need I say more? So we ain't rocking with that whole narrative, of, our brother Larry Hoover ain't redeemable, because Larry Hoover done the time for the crime. He's redeemed himself. Now he needs to be out here, amongst the Black society, where he can, do more good than anything, because his life is a walking testimony. And we're going to walk through and talk about it how we normally do, family. And, I want to say that I got white supremacists, suspected white supremacists oozing out of this one, news anchor's pores. I don't know what he was, but I got white supremacists coming all out of his pores, because he was trying to put it as our brother Larry Hoover ain't redeemable. I don't like that, always, quick to condemn Black life while, glorifying white degenerates. Because truth be told, in white society, white supremacist society, all of their heroes is damn degenerates. But let's get into this, family. Fair use.
We begin with breaking news. He was once one of the most notorious gangsters in Chicago. Tonight, President Trump is commuting the federal sentence of Gangster Disciples co-founder Larry Hoover.
Suzanne Lemonnier is in our newsroom. Suzanne, this move doesn't mean he'll be getting out of prison.
Erica, Joe, legal experts see this as a potential hollow victory. Now, while Hoover may be released from federal prison, he still has a 200-year state sentence, for which a parole board has already denied early release. In 1993, Hoover spoke to former CBS News Chicago reporter John Davis, and at that time, Hoover was 42 years old and had already served 20 years in prison.
I've done my time. I paid my debt to society.
That was Larry Hoover, more than 3 decades ago. At that time, the leader of the Gangster Disciples and convicted murderer told our John Davis he had a lot of time to think about ways to stop the gang violence on the streets of Chicago.
One teenager don't like the other teenager because the way he wears his hat, because his ideology is different from his. A disciple don't like a vice lord. We all Black people. It's no different.
At that time, Hoover, also known as King Larry, admitted being part of a fragile gang truce in the city and organizing a protest over plans to close health care clinics in African-American neighborhoods.
In white society, white supremacist society loves to point and wag the finger, talking about, look how, bad things are in the so-called hood. Look at them Blacks, doing Black on Black crime, robbing, stealing, selling drugs, when, all the so-called crimes, that go on inside the Black community, they done for financial gain, and there ain't no such thing as Black on Black crime. Every society got, crimes amongst their people, and when white supremacist society comes and starts pointing and wagging their fingers, family, we gotta, check them, what are the elements that create this system. And you show me any so-called, crime that goes on in the black community, I can show you how it directly links back and traces back to systematic racism, white supremacy. But let's continue. We can never let white supremacy off the hook.
Ron Safer, the lead prosecutor in Hoover's federal trial, reacts to news Hoover's life sentence has been commuted by President Trump.
I was disappointed. I do not.
This is the guy right here, family. Listen to him. I got, white. Oh, he's a prosecutor. There we go. Because I didn't know what he was. But I got white supremacy oozing all out of this guy's pores. Want to talk about brother Larry Hoover ain't redeemable. The nerve of this, suspected white supremacist.
I think that this is an appropriate end to the Larry Hoover story, at least the federal part of it.
Safer says Hoover was perhaps the most notorious criminal the state of Illinois has ever known.
No, the hell he wasn't. The most notorious criminal to come out of Illinois was Al Capone. Stop trying to shift the focus and dump all the focus onto our brother Larry Hoover, because what white supremacy will sit up and do is glorify the Bugsy Siegels, the John Gottis, the Bonnie and Clyde, the Al Capones. Hell, they even got a, tour up there in Chicago called the Chicago Crimes Tour. Look it up, family, where they take, people on a tour of, the mobster, where the mobsters were at in Chicago. So, it's just another way of, them trying to condemn black life while glorifying, white life, because white supremacists rather, they sit up and glorify all of they, icons in white supremacist society as degenerates. They glorify these mobsters, they hold them in high regard. But let's continue.
He was convicted of running a continuing criminal enterprise that had approximately 30,000 members across 28 states, selling over $100 million worth of drugs in the.
And what about the devastation that the Italian mobster Al Capone, Bonnie and Clyde, all of these other, white degenerates caused? Stop trying to shift the focus and dump it all on black people while taking the focus off of what whites is doing. But let's continue.
State of Illinois alone each year. And he ran that entire operation with ruthless efficiency from prison, where he was serving a state sentence for double murder.
Safer also told us about Hoover being recorded, saying teenagers needed to sell drugs for his criminal organization. The recording was made a year after the gangster disciple leader was interviewed on CBS Chicago.
There was another tape where Larry Hoover said, "You have to share your drugs with."
Another thing this puts me in mind of is what they did to brother Tukey Williams out there in California when that no good suspected white supremacist, Arnold Schwarzenegger, didn't, let our brother live, and just, pulled the plug on our brother and executed our brother, because our brother Tukey Williams' life was a testimony. He redeemed himself, and he could have made some, positive, strides, out here in amongst the free world. And his life, was a testimony, for, the black community. He could have served more good than anything, and this puts me in mind of our brother Larry Hoover, because both of our brothers, even Tukey Williams, they redeemed themselves, but in a white supremacist society, they don't want it to where, though, what they really want to say is that, black people can't redeem themselves, but they know they can. But that's what they really would love to say, because this ain't nothing but a suspected white supremacist with white supremacy oozing all out of his pores, on the screen that we looking at, family. But let's continue.
These children, and I'm talking about 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, so that they can sell it and they can have something. And he said, make them know that with you, they are somebody, and without you, they are nobody.
Meantime, shortly after the commutation announcement, Hoover's son posted this picture on Instagram. That's a White House official.
Yeah, that guy convinced me with that, family, because our brother Larry Hoover has done the time for the crime. He's redeemed himself. Now we need him, out here amongst the free world, where he could do some very great things, especially amongst the black community. So, in closing, it's been long enough. Our brother Larry Hoover has redeemed himself. He done the time for the crime, but in a white supremacist society, they benefit off of black demise, so we got to keep our eyes on that aspect as well. But in closing, free Larry Hoover. He's done the time for the crime. Peace.